I gave everything, my savings, my patience, my love, believing family would value me. But at my own granddaughter's wedding, I was humiliated in front of everyone, reduced to nothing more than a wallet with a cruel name tag. The old lady who's paying for everything. That moment broke something inside me, but it also lit a fire. This is the story of how I turned humiliation into freedom, and finally learned to say no. Comment below where you re-watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Meet Grandma, the old lady who's paying for everything. That's what my name tag said at my granddaughter Lily's wedding reception in Magnolia Hall, Charleston. Everyone laughed. I tried to laugh too, but my face burned hot, like I'd been slapped in front of the whole room. I had prepared for this day with care. For weeks, I told myself, May, this is Lily's day. No matter what happens, you will smile, you will be gracious, and you will not let anything dim the joy of seeing your granddaughter walk down the aisle. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror longer than I should have. My lavender dress hung on my shoulders just the way Tom, my late husband, had always liked it. I ran my fingers over the fabric, soft and light, remembering how he once said it made me look like springtime itself. I styled my hair with extra care, pinned it neatly, and fastened the pearl earrings he gave me on our 30th anniversary. On my wrist, the silver bracelet he had saved for months to buy. Every piece of me was wrapped in memory, in love, in the thought that somehow Tom was still here, proud to see our granddaughter's big day. I wanted to be more than just a guest. I wanted to be a pillar. A grandmother who stood tall and elegant, who gave love, not just money. And oh, how much I had already given. When the bills for the wedding started piling up, David, my son, came to me like a boy again, tugging at my sleeve, but with grown-up words. Mom, Lily deserves the best. It's her only wedding. We'll pay you back eventually, of course. His eyes never quite met mine when he said that. I knew, eventually, meant never. I didn't care. I thought about Lily's smile, about her childhood summers spent in my backyard chasing fireflies, about the way she used to curl up beside me and whisper secrets she didn't tell her parents. I wanted her to have her fairytale day, and if money could make it happen, then I would give until it hurt. So I wrote checks. First for the venue, Magnolia Hall, with its chandeliers, marble floors, and windows that looked out over the gardens. Then for the catering, $45,000 for filet mignon, salmon, and champagne that would flow all night long. Then for the flowers, orchids and roses that filled every table, every corner. Dress fittings, photography, a live band, even a last-minute horse-drawn carriage because Lily had once said she dreamed of arriving like a princess. By the time the planning was finished, I had spent nearly $80,000. And that was just the wedding. Over the years, I had poured so much more into them. David's house remodel, private schools for the children, cars, tuition. If I added it all up, the number would make most people dizzy. But I told myself, this is family. Money doesn't matter when it comes to family. I walked into Magnolia Hall with my head high, my heart swelling with pride. Guests were already gathered in little circles, sipping champagne, the women in jewel-toned gowns, the men in crisp tuxedos. Strings of fairy lights twinkled above the dance floor, and everywhere I looked, people were smiling. The atmosphere was warm, golden, almost magical. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe. To believe this would be a day of unity and love. That my sacrifices would be invisible, not because no one cared, but because love itself would be enough. I imagined Tom beside me, whispering, "Look at what you've given them, May. Look at how happy she is. This is your legacy." And I believed him. When Lily appeared in the doorway, radiant in her white lace gown, the room sighed in unison. Tears stung my eyes. She looked so beautiful, so full of life and hope. She leaned into her father's arm, David's arm, and I caught my breath. For just a second, I thought I saw the little girl she used to be. The ceremony itself was flawless. The vows were heartfelt, the music heavenly. When the couple kissed and everyone clapped, I felt joy bubble up inside me. It was worth every dollar, every sacrifice, just to see that look on Lily's face. But then came the reception. The laughter. The name tag. The cruel reminder of what I was to them. Not May, beloved mother and grandmother. Not May, the woman who raised, sacrificed, loved. Just the old lady who's paying for everything. That one line cut through all the fairy lights and flowers, all the champagne bubbles and music. It stripped away the illusion I had wrapped myself in. I smiled through the sting of tears, telling myself not to ruin Lily's day. But inside, a quiet question began to whisper, steady as a drumbeat. If this is love, why does it hurt so much? The planner at the check-in table handed me the badge like it was nothing. A little rectangle of laminated truth I hadn't asked for. I pinned it to my dress, and the pin bit my skin, a tiny sting that said, "Wake up, May." Cute, right? The girl chirped. Your son approved them himself. I felt my mouth form a smile that didn't belong to me. Adorable, I heard myself say. My voice sounded like it belonged to a stranger wearing my face. I walked into the swirl of music and clinking glasses. People glanced down at my chest and then up at my eyes with the polite, quick smile you give a cashier. I kept moving, willing my heartbeat to slow. If I stood still too long, I worried the ground would tilt and I'd slide under the tables like a dropped napkin. There was David near the bar, handsome in his tux, Lily's baby photo tucked into his pocket square, a sentimental touch that would have made me proud any other day. He looked at my badge and smirked. Mom, he said, don't be mad. It's just a joke, is it? I asked softly. He glanced over my shoulder, already scanning for someone more interesting. People should know who to thank. Linda glided up beside him, all red lipstick and glittering earrings, the kind that make a woman look expensive. She tapped my badge with a manicured nail, a playful little ding against the plastic. Come on, May, she purred. You have a sense of humor. And truly, the whole thing is harmless. A little transparency never hurt anyone. I looked at the nail mark on the plastic. Transparency, I repeated, as if it were a new word I had to taste first. Besides, she added, loud enough for the women beside us to hear, you'd hate for us to take credit for your generosity. Their laughter was soft and well-bred, like silk sliding over a table. I swallowed and looked toward the dance floor, where the band was testing a saxophone line that made the crystal chandeliers tremble. I thought my name would be enough, I said. May Carter, grandmother of the bride. David's smile thinned. Mom, please don't start. I haven't started, I said. I'm standing. Linda's eyes flicked to my earrings, to the bracelet Tom bought me, to the lavender dress. I could feel her inventorying me, pricing me, like a shopper. You look lovely, she said, and somehow it sounded like a verdict. I excused myself before my voice betrayed me. In the corridor by the restrooms, the noise softened, replaced by the hum of the air conditioner and the distant laughter I suddenly couldn't bear. I put my hand on the wall to steady myself and read the words again. Meet Grandma, the old lady who's paying for everything. Old. Paying. Everything. I remembered a different badge, the paper one Lily drew when she was 7 for her school's Grandparents' Day. She had written, Hero Grandma May, in purple marker and stuck a crooked heart sticker in the corner. I'd kept it in a drawer with birthday cards and drier faded photos. The bathroom door opened, and a woman I didn't know stepped out, powder scent trailing after her. She glanced at my badge and gave me a sympathetic smile. Families, she whispered, and slipped away. I stood there, breathing shallowly, until the heat in my face cooled. Tom's voice rose in my memory like a tide. May, you teach people how to treat you. I had nodded back then, believing I had done my teaching well. But habits, I see now, are lessons too. I had taught them I would say yes. I had taught them I would pay. I had taught them my love came with a checkbook attached, and they had learned the lesson perfectly. When I returned to the ballroom, a cluster of guests blocked my path, neighbors from David's street. May, one of the men boomed. We were just saying, you're a legend. The way you step up? If I ever need a benefactor. He laughed at his own joke, and the women tittered around him like birds. Careful, I said, smiling so hard my jaw ached. You might end up with a badge. They laughed again, delighted. I made my way to the coffee station. I wanted my hands to have a task. Pour, stir, sip. The cup was blessedly warm, solid. I held it like a small anchor. Across the room, the photographer lined up the bridal party. Linda posed with Lily, angling her face toward the light she knew was hers. David appeared at my elbow. Mom, could you grab the envelopes from the gift table and keep them safe? Of course, I said. Of course is another habit I had taught them. He leaned in and kissed my cheek. Love you, he said automatically, the way you say bless you after a sneeze. I watched him go and thought, I am not a mother right now. I am a service. A server passed with canapés. I took one and immediately put it back, ashamed of the reflex. I wasn't hungry. I was emptied out. From somewhere behind me, a voice floated. They've got their own ATM, Grandma May. A second voice answered, amused, wish I had one of those. The laughter dissolved into the general hum. I did not turn around. I stared into the swirling black coffee and saw the surface tremble with the beat of the bass. I thought of the kitchen remodel, the tuition, the cars, the vacations with receipts I still kept in folders labeled family. I thought of all the times I'd signed my name and called it love. May? Lily's soft voice. I turned. Her veil brushed my arm like a cloud. For a moment, I saw my little girl again, knees grass-stained, asking for more time before bedtime. Grandma, she said, eyes shiny, thank you for everything. The words should have soothed me. Instead, they landed like coins in a jar. Thank you for everything, and by everything she meant money, not lullabies or lessons or the way I taught her to thread a needle and mend wet tears. You look beautiful, I said. Hold on to that. She squeezed my hand, then hurried away, swept back into her party, her life. I stood there, badge pressed against my heartbeat, and felt something inside me give, not a break with sound, but a quiet seam opening, letting in air I hadn't breathed in years. During cocktails, I heard it, soft laughter behind me, the kind people try to smother but never quite succeed. They've got their own ATM, a woman whispered. Grandma May. The words slid like knives into my back. I held my coffee cup tighter, watching the steam swirl upward, pretending I hadn't heard. But once you hear something like that, you can't unhear it. Every chuckle in the room, every glance in my direction, felt heavier. I thought of all the checks I had written, all the zeros that had slid across paper in my shaky hand. David's kitchen remodel, $40,000. His kids' private school tuition, nearly $60,000. Cars when they turned 16, vacations when they graduated. When I tallied the numbers, the figure was staggering. $240,000 over just 3 years. And yet here I was, a walking ATM, my name tag broadcasting my role for anyone who hadn't figured it out already. Linda clinked her glass with a spoon, drawing everyone's attention. She looked radiant in emerald silk, her voice smooth as butter. Ladies and gentlemen, she called out, before the night continues, I have a little announcement. Our dear May has once again outdone herself. Not only has she made this whole wedding possible, but she's also given Lily and Mark the gift of a honeymoon in Hawaii. Applause erupted, hands clapping, champagne glasses raised high. Some people even whistled. I sat frozen, coffee cup trembling in my grip. That was supposed to be private, a quiet gesture for Lily and her new husband, not a spectacle to feed Linda's performance. Lily blushed, ducking her head with an embarrassed smile, but she didn't correct her stepmother. David beamed like he had done something noble himself. I wanted to vanish. In that moment, I realized what I had become in their eyes. Not a mother, not a grandmother, not a woman who had raised children, buried a husband, worked hard for every dollar. I was a purse, a checkbook with pearls. The conversations around me turned into background noise. Forks scraping plates, champagne fizzing, shoes tapping the marble floor, all of it blurred into a low hum as my memories came rushing back. The time I wrote a check for David's first house. The way he hugged me, murmuring, "You're saving us, Mom." The vacation to Florida, when Linda whispered, "You'll come too, won't you? You've already paid for the villa." The tuition bills that arrived with David's voice on the phone. "Mom, you don't want the kids to fall behind, do you?" Every time, I had said yes. Every time, I told myself it was love, that love gives without counting. But sitting there in Magnolia Hall, applause ringing in my ears, I realized love had been replaced with expectation. And expectation had turned into entitlement. I was no longer giving. I was being taken. A young cousin leaned over, nudging me with a grin. "You must feel proud, May. They wouldn't be here without you." Proud. Was that the word? Or used? I forced a smile. Yes, very proud. But inside, something sharp pressed against my ribs. A crack forming where dignity used to be. I escaped to the hallway where the noise thinned into echoes and soft air conditioning. Magnolia Hall smelled of lemon polish and roses, and for a moment I pressed my palm to the cool wainscoting the way you touch a church pew to keep standing. I needed a breath, a minute, anything to stop the trembling in my hands. Mrs. Carter? I turned. A man about my age stood near the coatroom, neat gray suit, steady eyes that had seen their share of bad news. He carried a small leather folio tucked under his arm like something valuable. When he spoke again, his tone gentled, as if he were approaching a frightened bird. "I'm Ben Lawson," he said. "Tom's attorney." My breath caught on my husband's name. "Tom's?" He nodded. "We worked together for, it must be 25 years. He asked me to attend today. Just in case." The phrase, "just in case," sat between us like a ceramic bowl one was afraid to tip. In case of what? Ben glanced toward the ballroom doors, where the music swelled and laughter spilled into the hall. "In case something happened that crossed the line." He opened the folio. Inside was an envelope sealed with gold wax. I recognized Tom's careful script on the front, for May. To be delivered only if needed. My fingers wouldn't cooperate at first. I slid a nail under the wax and lifted it slowly, as if opening it too quickly would make Tom vanish again. Inside was a single document and a short note in his hand. "May," it read, "if they ever make you feel small, remember who you are. Use this only to protect your dignity. I love you. T." I blinked until the words steadied, then looked at the document beneath the note. Legal language, crisp and formal. A codicil to Tom's will, executed and witnessed 2 years before he died. I read the key line twice to be sure. "Any heir who publicly humiliates, coerces, or seeks to control my wife's personal finances forfeits his or her inheritance and any discretionary gifts tied to my estate." My heart gave a slow, astonished thud. Ben's voice was quiet. "Tom wanted to spare you the burden of carrying this knowledge unless necessary. He told me once, if they respect her, they won't need the threat. If they don't, she'll need a sword." "A sword," I repeated, smiling despite the ache. Tom with his old-fashioned chivalry, sharpening paperwork instead of steel. Ben glanced at my badge. His jaw tightened. I saw the tags as I came in. I also heard the honeymoon announcement. "That qualifies. Do I have to do anything now?" I asked. "Sue them? Make a scene?" The very thought made me sick. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to," he said. "The codicil stands whether you wave it around or keep it in your purse. But I would advise documenting tonight." Photos of the badge. A copy of the program in Linda's handwriting about the sponsor's toast. "Anything that shows intent to demean." "Intent to demean," I murmured. That's exactly what it felt like, intent. Ben closed the folio and handed me the envelope. "May, your husband respected you. He also anticipated excesses. He asked me to tell you something else if this day came." I braced myself. "What?" "That he knew how much you'd given over the years, and he worried they'd confuse your kindness with obligation. He said, 'Ben, write it so she can say no without becoming the villain.'" Ben held my gaze. "You are allowed to say no." The words washed over me like cool water. Allowed to say no. At 66, I needed permission like a child, which was its own kind of humiliation. But I took the gift anyway. "Thank you," I said, folding the note carefully. "I don't want to ruin Lily's day." "You won't," he said. "Quiet boundaries aren't ruin. They're repair." A burst of applause rolled down the hallway. I could hear Linda's bright voice leading some game at the microphone, something about who had dated longest, who had the best love story. The guests laughed in waves. Ben's expression softened. "I'll be nearby if you need me." Tom made me promise. I touched the envelope to my chest, right above the ridiculous badge. "He always did his best work for me after the fact," I said, and felt the ghost of my husband's chuckle in the space between us. As Ben walked away, I caught my reflection in the gilt mirror. Lavender dress, pearls, hair pinned neat, eyes older than they were this morning. I slid the badge off and set it on the coatroom shelf. Then I slipped Tom's envelope into my clutch where the pin had been, a trade I should have made years ago, spectacle for safeguard. Back in the ballroom, Linda was mid-quip, basking in the attention. David stood at her shoulder, proud, flattered by reflection. I moved past them like a quiet current, to the gift table where the ivory envelopes lay like sleeping birds. I took a photo of my badge on the shelf, another of the printed sign that read tonight's celebration sponsored by Grandma May. With a cartoon of a money bag beside a wine glass. It would look harmless to anyone who had never swallowed shame. I slipped my phone away. Ben's words pressed steady in my mind. You are allowed to say no. I felt Tom's too, like a hand at the small of my back. If they ever make you feel small, remember who you are. So I stood taller. I poured myself water instead of wine. I watched my family perform and, for the first time, I didn't clap on command. I simply observed. And in the observing, I felt something settle in me, an anchor dropping into deeper water, catching hold. An unexpected ally had found me in a hallway and handed me a sword made of paper and love. I wasn't a wallet. I wasn't a joke. I was May. And I had just remembered. My 66th birthday should have been a celebration. A few close friends, maybe a dinner at my favorite restaurant, laughter over cake. Instead, I found myself at David's house, seated at a long dining table that felt more like a courtroom than a home. Linda had decorated with pastel balloons and streamers, but the cheer looked flimsy, like paint over rotting wood. I sat at the head of the table, my name spelled wrong on a frosted cake. Happy birthday, May. We ate in awkward silence until David cleared his throat and stood. His smile was too wide, his tone rehearsed. Mom, he began, we've been talking. And we think it's time to consider something important. For your safety. For your future. I set my fork down. Go on. He exchanged a glance with Linda, who nodded eagerly. We think you need financial guardianship, David said. You've been making reckless choices. Reckless. The word hit me like a slap. Linda chimed in, voice syrupy. We worry about you, May. You've been giving so much money away, and we don't want you taken advantage of. It would be better if David managed things. Just until. She trailed off, but her smile told me she meant forever. I looked around the table. My grandchildren avoided my eyes, picking at their food. Lily's hands trembled as she refilled her water glass. Only Ethan, my youngest grandson, met my gaze, his jaw tight, his eyes stormy with unspoken protest. I breathed slowly, remembering Ben's words in the hallway, Tom's note in my hand. Use this only to protect your dignity. I reached into my purse and laid the envelope gently on the table. The movement was small, but it changed the air. Conversation stilled, forks hovered. What's that? David asked, his voice too loud. A gift from your father, I said. My fingers slid the document free, its edges crisp under the dining light. A codicil to his will. One he prepared in case this ever happened. Linda's face drained of color. I read aloud, my voice steady. Any heir who publicly humiliates, coerces, or seeks to control my wife's finances shall forfeit their inheritance and any discretionary gifts tied to my estate. The words landed like stones. David shot to his feet, pointing a finger at me. This is unfair. You can't hold us hostage with Dad's money. No, I said firmly. What's unfair is reducing me to nothing but a bank. Linda pressed her hands flat on the table, her rings flashing under the chandelier. May, think about what you're saying. We're your family. Family doesn't brand me with name tags. Family doesn't announce my private gifts to a room full of strangers. Family doesn't scheme to take my freedom. The silence grew thick, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low but clear. Grandma, you don't owe them an explanation. My heart swelled at his courage. Thank you, sweetheart, I said softly. David paced, hands clenched. So that's it? You're cutting us out? Over a joke? A joke repeated enough times becomes the truth, I replied. And you made me into nothing but a wallet. That ends tonight. Linda's composure cracked. Do you realize what this means? Do you realize how much we've counted on? Yes, I interrupted. I realize all of it. I realize I taught you to expect my yes. I realize I let you treat my love like an endless account. But Tom saw what I refused to see. And he left me the means to stop it. The codicil lay between us like a blade. David stared at it, then at me, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. You'll regret this, he hissed. I met his eyes without blinking. No, I regret waiting this long. The next morning, I woke up to a house that felt strangely wider, as if the walls had taken a step back to give me room to breathe. The lavender dress hung on the closet door, pearls coiled in their dish like a quiet moon. I brewed coffee and stood by the window while the kettle hissed, my hands steady for the first time in months. I had not slept much, but what came felt like real rest, the kind where your bones finally stop bracing for the next blow. Ben called at 9. May, he said, I filed a notice with the estate trustee. The codicil is now part of the active distribution file. No drama unless they make it. Thank you, I said. I'm done with drama. That week, I did 3 things I'd put off for years. First, I sorted the folders marked family and renamed them boundaries. I wrote letters, calm, factual, no accusations, stating that all gifts were concluded, that future help would be considered only when respect was present, and that I would not discuss my finances again. I sent copies to David and Linda by certified mail. I saved the postal receipts the way a woman saves proof of life. Second, I hired a bookkeeper who spoke to me like I was the client and not a child. We made a budget that included a line I'd never seen in my ledgers, joy. Under it, art supplies, museum memberships, free weekend trips, just because. I underlined joy twice, then circled it for good measure. Third, I said yes to Ethan. He had shown me a scribbled business plan months ago, shy as a boy confessing a crush. A little bookstore cafe in an old brick building on Bay Street, coffee, poetry nights, paper that smells like trees in the rain. It's a bad investment, Linda had laughed then. No one reads. I read. Tom read. Lily read when she was little, curled into my lap like a comma. Ethan and I walked through the empty space while dust motes floated like slow fireworks. I'll pay rent myself, he said quickly, maybe a small startup loan? Not a loan, I said. A partnership. We shook on it, his palm warm, his eyes shining. We painted the walls a soft moss green. I hung 3 of my watercolors, azaleas after a storm, the marsh at dusk, Tom's old hat on the porch rail. The sign over the door read, Paper Harbor, books and coffee. On opening day, I baked lemon bars and stood at the counter with a jar of pens for customers to write favorite lines on note cards. The first card said, You are allowed to say no. Lily came by 2 months later, hair in a loose bun, sleep-starved and glowing. She carried a baby with a serious little mouth and eyes so dark they looked like deep water. Meet Thomas, she whispered. She did not mention the name like an apology or a trick. She said it like a prayer. I held him and felt my heart fold around a new, tender corner. Lily cried. I did too. We didn't speak of the name tag or the honeymoon applause. We spoke of diapers and colic and where the light is best for naps. When she left, she wiped her eyes and said, I'm learning. I promise. I believed her. As for David and Linda, there were ripples, calls I didn't answer, messages that grew from surprise to fury to brittle politeness. Then distance. They sold their house and moved to a development with a gate and a lake that looks painted on. I receive postcards now and then, sunsets that don't belong to them, promises of a visit that always falls through. I keep the cards in a drawer with the old badge. Some days I take the drawer out and sit with both, what they named me, and what I refused to be. People warned me loneliness would come. It didn't, not the way I feared. It turns out loneliness is lighter than humiliation. It doesn't stick to your skin the same way. Besides, my days filled quickly. Mornings at the bookstore, afternoons painting by the window, evenings walking past porches humming with cicadas. Sometimes I stop by kitchen to stir soup, sometimes I sit on the dock and let the marsh teach me patience all over again. On my next birthday, we celebrated at Paper Harbor. No streamers, no speeches. Just books stacked like small cities and the soft clink of cups. Ben and his wife came, and Ethan read a poem he wrote on the back of a receipt the night before. Lily stood up at the end, baby Thomas on her hip, and said, to Grandma May, who reminds us that love is not a tab to be kept open, but a table where everyone brings a dish. People laughed and wiped at their eyes. I did too. After the cake, I walked outside alone and looked up. The sky over Charleston was a clean blue bowl. I thought of Tom. You can rest now, I whispered. I found the line and I'm holding it. A week later, I boxed the name tag and drove it to the city dump. The sun was a fierce coin. I asked the attendant if I could set a small metal thing in the scrap bin myself. He shrugged, and I climbed the short ladder, palms sweating, heart unexpectedly quick. I set the badge down and then, without fanfare, I turned and left it there among broken hinges and bent nails. On the way home, I bought peonies. I have not stopped giving. I have simply started choosing. I fund Ethan's author nights and a teacher's classroom library. I pay the light bill for a widow down the street when the summer storms knock power out and she smiles like the sun is back. I set up a scholarship in Tom's name for apprentices who fix things with their hands, boats, bricks, instruments. Every letter of thanks feels like a small mending in a worn quilt. Once in a while, shame still taps my shoulder, asking to cut in. When it does, I picture Magnolia Hall, how the chandeliers trembled when the saxophone warmed up, how my coffee rippled with the bass, how a man in a hallway handed me a sword I didn't know I owned. Then I straighten, smooth my skirt, and keep dancing with myself. Here is my truth, plain as bread. I paid for everything: money, patience, nights of sleep, years of softness. They paid me with humiliation. But I am the one who signed the last check, and I made it out to freedom. I paid for everything: money, patience, years of quiet sacrifice. They paid me with humiliation, stripping me down to a name tag, a wallet, a joke. But in the end, I chose myself. I chose freedom, dignity, and the right to say no. I learned that love without respect is not love at all. It's dependency dressed in family clothes. Now, when I give, it is because I want to, not because they expect it. And when I am remembered, it won't be for the checks I wrote, but for the courage to stop being reduced to them. So here is my truth. It's never too late to draw a line, to reclaim your worth, to turn humiliation into power. Tell me, have you ever been treated as nothing but a wallet? What did you do? Share your story in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine.